Well, welcome to the rules meeting of March 4th, 2021. The meeting's being held remotely per Governor Baker's order of last year. Let's see. We have minutes, right, from last time?
February 11th.
I move we accept them.
Second?
Okay, motion a second. All in favor, Councillor Coniff.
Aye.
Councillor Rist.
Aye.
I vote aye as well. Minutes are accepted. Right, well, let's just jump into it then. Councillor Flood, do you want to just sort of introduce this proposal?
Yes, let me grab my letter here. I had essentially to should I read out loud the letter for the record that I submitted to the council, or just can I paraphrase?
You can paraphrase. It's
okay.
It's already a matter of public.
Already in the record.
Perfect. So essentially where we're at is just recognizing that when this pandemic is behind us, this possibility of continuing to meet remotely, I'd like to see it on the table and see it expanded. But I do believe this is a multi-step process. So my understanding of how this would work is essentially this would be something that we as the full council would recommend to the mayor to institute as the CEO of the city. And so also part of that would be also figuring out who would
She's frozen.
executive also has. Did I freeze?
Erica, we
You're
lost
back,
you
my
there.
dear. You're back.
Okay. So there's two things. We would have to make the recommendation. The mayor would ultimately have to accept and approve it, and also decide to fund the mechanism for holding the remote meetings. And then as a second part of that, that essentially allows the public bodies to gather remotely. But I'm hoping that this conversation opens up the possibility for allowing the public to interact with us remotely. So this idea came out of not only just the need to continue engagement and transparency as we move forward, but during the pandemic recently, Easthampton Media did some upgrades to the council chambers technology. One of the things that was added is a smart TV. So in a scenario where things begin to open up, but not everybody is comfortable attending meetings in public, we already have the technology in place to basically run a hybridized meeting. But we don't have open meeting law that allows for that. As far as I can tell, I've been doing a lot of research. I don't see any discussions or any laws on record right now that really allow for this. So I'm bringing this to you all for help and a mechanism to move it forward.
Great. Councillor Coniff, I saw your hand.
Yeah, so while there is no law that allows it, the open meeting law does not disallow it. In other words, they're silent on this topic. And I think I read somewhere, Erica, I may have sent it to you, where they say if the city wants to allow remote access by the public, it's entirely up to them, and it does not violate open meeting rules. The only thing that falls under open meeting rules relative to remote access is that a quorum of city councilors must be present in the chambers.
See, that's what I was kind of thinking. Councillor Rist, I see your hand.
Well, we're finished, Tom.
Yeah, is that there's, I know that there's a lot of stuff about whether or not a member could, say, remotely cast a vote, but I don't think there's anything that would stop us from just allowing somebody to watch the meeting on Zoom, right, and then potentially have either the council leadership or the clerk or someone be able to take people off mute if they wanted to make a comment during, I just don't, all of the stuff that I've seen, and again, you guys, for your Easthampton media backgrounds, and Dan, just from your time on the council, might all know this better than me, but my understanding is that all of that is really about our participation. The public, if we want to let them call in or Zoom in or whatever, I don't think there's anything stopping us from doing that, because it's not actually they're not voting. They're just communicating. Am I basically right there? Dan, I saw your hand.
Well, I have a couple things. Erica, first, when you submitted this, I thought we were going to have to accept an MGL law to allow it to happen, where we're allowing remote participation. Is that correct?
Well, this is sort of my question of it, is clarifying that piece. So Barbara kind of pointed out that this is probably the mayor's position to accept. So it would be our position to recommend that mayor accept.
Okay. Well, then
That's number one. And then the second part, just to sort of tie into that and answer Tom's question, is I don't see anything that disallows it, which sometimes that means it's a green light. And sometimes that means because there's nothing written, we need to write something. So that's where I'm sort of have the giant question mark on how do we.
I think Tom hit it on the head. I think the open meeting law, first of all, just so you know, I don't want us to ever get away from, I'd hate to see our governments not have open participation in person. When we have public hearings, it's not just the expressions of the people like we're having in Zoom, but their body language. It really helps us to have that personal contact. But what I like about the new normal is I used to go to meetings when I shouldn't go, when I might have a little touch of the flu, or maybe there's constituents that wanted to go and say something, but they couldn't because they're sick. They're feeling not up to it. I think if both a counselor and or a constituent, if we can find out if a counselor can do this, I think the quorum has to be there. But if I can't make a meeting, but it's an important vote, I don't want to feel pressured, which has happened to me many times, to go to the meeting because I want to make that vote. But I've got a cold or I'm sick and I'm infecting my neighbors. So this new normal where we're wearing masks, that's really hit me. That's the reason I don't have the flu now, not only because of social distancing, because I'm wearing a mask around my grandkids. So I'm not catching the flu. But my point is, I'm hoping that this allows remote participation by a counselor who doesn't want to come to a meeting and infect everybody, but also people who want to come in to participate, not just watch. They can watch now on Easthampton Media, but if they're coming to the meeting on Zoom, it's because they want to say something and they don't feel comfortable being at the meeting because they're ill. That's my hope anyway. I don't know if that's in the law or if that's allowed.
Thanks. Yeah, that makes sense. Councillor Conniff, I saw your hand.
So, part of what I think we're charged with here is, so yes, I think it is the mayor's purview to accept the MGL. We make the recommendation, she accepts the MGL, we can now participate remotely. I think this committee should create the process. I think we should document what that process looks like. There are 5 acceptable reasons why a city councilor could not be physically at a meeting. We need to state those, and we need to have we need to be very clear that the councilor who is going to be remote has to get permission from the chair of the meeting, whether it's a committee meeting or a city council meeting. You can't just dial in and say, I'm going to be remote. We have to have controls around this. And then as far as the public goes, I agree that, it's great to have the public in the same room with us, and I love that. But I think Councillor Flood is definitely hitting it on the head when she talks about creating more accessibility. One of the things that is a challenge for public meetings is getting the people who want to be there. And as we know, the age of Easthampton is increasing in age, and those folks want to participate. And this, we know from city council meetings, we've had much more participation via Zoom than we have ever had meeting over meeting over meeting in city council chambers. Almost every meeting, we have more people than we used to have, like 2 or 3 at all the meetings. Now we easily have 10, oftentimes 40 or 50. And so it does generate accessibility.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. That's definitely, accessibility for older people, or like the other constituency who I hear from a lot, because there's a lot of sort of starter home type, homes in my precinct, is people who are like, I'd love to come to this meeting and speak up about this, but I have, 2 young kids. And, they it's just that's not going to work. And so, and I can't find a sitter, so I guess I'm going to have to. So it'd be great if they could just, come in and speak their piece. But yes, obviously, like if people can come, they should. And Dan, just to sort of echo what you said, I have absolutely come to meetings like when I was just not well, because it was something I really cared about, and I was worried about how that vote would have gone if I didn't have, a chance to weigh in on it. So I came, even though like that was probably really the disrespectful thing to do for the community, because I was not feeling well. And, so just, Dan, I saw your hand, but I just want to just jump in really quickly to say, it sounds like me, like there's really 2 things that are going to be here. So one of them is just a motion to recommend that the mayor accept this process. And the second is sort of, well, or maybe it is even there's then like actually sort of figuring out how that process can be. It sounds like there's going to be, at least in terms of the city council, now the planning board and whatever, how they want to do that, they're going to have to figure out. But we're going to have to come up with some rules around this for us. Does that make sense that this is basically like, A, we're making a recommendation, and B, we need to actually draft some rules? Does that basically make sense? Okay, Dan, I saw your hand. Sorry for jumping in like that.
I just want to say, first of all, as much as I like in person, I do think a hybrid participation is important. Now, my only concern was the people on Zoom who came to participate actually wanted to make a statement, ask a question. And the other part of it is making sure counselors are allowed to come and vote if they're on Zoom, whether it's a finance committee meeting and the question for that is, there has to be 2 finance members there to match open meeting law. The third member could be on Zoom, if I understand the law. And lastly, my concern is and I think what we have to do before we go to the council is do exactly what Peg said. Let's write down the rules for this, because I think the rules apply to committees. Because if the mayor accepts this, she might want to make sure that the committees that are under her jurisdiction, the local boards and committees that have to follow open meeting law, if they want to add Zoom participation to their meetings, they have to follow the same rules. So I think and I think Erica probably has the answers to this, we have to be on the same page as the mayor with regard to how these rules will work. And who's controlling, I guess it would be Barb, who's with the laptop that's linked to the communication. And maybe Erica, I know you have other things to say, but could you enlighten me as to that?
Yeah, couple thoughts.
That technical thing, how it would work?
Yeah, so there's a few things you touched on there. First of all, the MGL already contains rules. Peg mentioned there's 5. It's personal illness, personal disability, emergency, military service, and geographic distance. Now, I did find, I think it was Michigan is phasing out some of those so that eventually military service is going to be the only rule that they maintain post-pandemic, and it goes down from like personal illness, military service, geographic distance, and then the last phase, they're leaving it just military service.
We're talking about elected officials, or
no? That's for their adaptation of what we're saying here is their post-pandemic planning is going to get rid of this so that they're only maintaining, because I was looking for a precedent out there. So for us, those 5 rules are what allow you to participate remotely according to the standing open meeting law in regards to remote, right?
In Massachusetts.
You talk about the member of the committee?
In Massachusetts, currently, the remote participation for public bodies. Yeah. So those are the 5 standing rules that we would be adopting when accepting this law. You're correct. There has to be a quorum present physically. So we do have to still have a quorum in order to take votes, and votes in a hybridized model would still have to be via roll call. And the other important piece is it still has to, all participants have to be clearly audible to each other. So there has to be a good connection. So to touch on some of the new technology, that large screen smart TV will have the ability to log into the Zoom, and it will also have the ability to simultaneously feed into the Easthampton Media stream alongside the 4 cameras that are now in the council chambers. I don't know what that's going to look like on a screen, to be honest with you, in terms of broadcasting, but I trust that the Easthampton Media staff will have that worked out.
I was just going to say, I exchanged emails with Jen Ramsey today, and I asked her if we could do a demo.
Yeah, I know we're going to do a walkthrough at some point.
With this group, this committee.
Yeah.
And I asked for that. She suggested, maybe next week, potentially.
I'm on vacation next week. That's perfect.
Okay, so that's the other thing we should talk about is arranging with her like a mock, just a walkthrough, and the ability to see it from, like, we may set up a laptop in another room so that participant would be considered remote, and then there would be people in the chamber and all the cameras and all of how it would look, kind of what Erica was saying, but how would this look in a broadcast way? And I think that would help us to kind of figure out how we want this to go beyond just the members of the committee and moving it to the public.
Yeah. My only other thing, Erica, and I think it's probably feasible, but someone at the table, as if Barbara has a laptop and so-and-so has raised their hand and they want to speak, Barbara's the one, or the president of the council.
Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves, Dan. We haven't seen the setup. That's what we'll
I'm just making sure that there's no technical problem.
That's what we'll work through.
To prevent that. But I think you're right. That's probably easy to fix.
And to touch on that, Dan, I mean, that is definitely a consideration we're going to have to account for. The other piece of the upgrade with the technology is that in the way that we used to have a staff member, and Easthampton Media used to have a staff member in the back of the room controlling all the cameras, they can now do that from the studio in Eastworks. So they're going to be fully off-site controlling all of that as if they were in the room. And we can work out the technical issues later, but maybe they're helping us with unmuting and muting people. I don't know. We are going to have somebody on crowd management. I want to say the other important piece that this is really important for me, you touched on, I mean, not only if somebody's sick or if somebody has children at home, but there is the ability piece. And there are people that just have mobility issues and it's not easy to be present in person. And I would like to increase and keep the engagement we have. And I also, in the way that I tend to dream big and think about ways technology can help us, I think eventually it would be really great to explore interpretive, how we can use closed captioning or live language interpretation to bring in other members of the community. So I think that's my big vision for this technology is how do we bring that on board eventually? It's not for day one, I don't think, but I do think there's potential there. There's already closed captioning on Zoom that we're not using in meetings now. And when people speak slow enough, it does actually translate. So I see this as a way to really open up the doors down the road for people. So that's why it's also important to me. It's going to take one step at a time to get it all working smoothly, of course.
Did you mention funding earlier? What do we have to
the only funding piece is the mayor going to continue to pay for the Zoom account, or where does that come from? That's really the only funding piece that is going to come into play.
Do we know how much that is?
I don't know how much that is now. Actually, I was going to ask because I know I have some members of finance here. Does anybody know what Zoom is costing us?
We don't, but it's around, I want to say It's because our account is more expensive than everybody else's because we have the webinar capability built into
Right.
ours, which is why people borrow ours all the time. But I want to say it's maybe 100 and something, less than 200 a month, but it's a month. So, I mean, that's it, I think. It's like a cable.
I think for the service it provides to the community and the potential, it's well worth the expense. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I mean, my general take on it is if for a couple $100 a month, even if it's a couple hundred, you could enfranchise potentially thousands of people.
Yeah.
You're almost negligent in not doing that. And I'd be
Exactly.
happy saying that to anybody who wants to argue with me on that. But like, I think that's great. Here's my question is just in terms of the process is, does it make sense? I mean, I think we all agree we should do this. Should we take a vote tonight on recommending this to the mayor and then move forward with like a draft set of rules? Because like we can make this recommendation. It's still going to be months before we are actually able to be in person. But I feel like it almost would make sense to just right off the bat say like, this is something we want to do, right? And then this also, like, I feel like this jives a little bit with our sort of 5C requests about things that are getting sent to council, just because there's not specific rules language in here. I almost feel like it makes sense to take a vote tonight and then make a motion at the next meeting about making this recommendation to the mayor, and then sort of as a second phase, introduce some draft rules that we can work on. Does that sound sensible to everybody?
Yeah.
I'm okay with it. I just want to ask, is there any, in the law, and I didn't read the law, but Erica, is there any room for local adaptations? In other words, if we want to change any aspect of it, are we allowed to? And, or is it accept the law as it is? I'm not sure there would be much need to do that. I mean, we adapt a rule about voting or participation, etc. Whatever those rules are, those are internal to the council, and we have them already. So I guess my only concern is there anything in there where we can add anything to it if we wanted to? Not that we want to, but.
Councilor Koff.
Yeah, so there really isn't anything. I mean, all the mayor is doing is saying, and all the law really says is, you may allow a member of your public body to participate in the meeting remotely. That's
It's a very broad law.
Yeah, and
Very broad, yeah.
And it gives 5 reasons, and those reasons have to be stated at the beginning of the meeting as to why that person's not here. You don't have to give details, but why. Everything has to be, it gives those kind of details, but that's all you're doing. So to me, and in reading other things and rulings by the open meeting law attorneys, the attorney general, if it's not in the open meeting rules, you can do what you need to do. So
as long as they don't violate an open meeting obvious rule. So
yep.
And I think the quorum is the biggest one.
Right.
What else?
The mayor has the, I was going to say the mayor has the ability to allow committees to opt out. So a committee, so let's say the EDIC decides, and the chair decides, I don't want anyone remote. They have that ability to opt out and say, I don't want to have remote access from my committee. That's a thing that the mayor can authorize that within her purview.
And she may also want to just give the Zoom account to the city council, because that's the most important one, in the school board, say, but not have 5 different Zoom accounts so that meetings can happen simultaneously, because that's going to happen with all the boards and committees we have. So
And
I
there
don't
may
know
be
where
other
she is
technology.
now. Huh?
There may be other technology beyond Zoom that is more flexible for multi-use.
Yeah.
Who knows? I don't
Actually,
know.
I have a couple questions. Just in terms of the technology, like I know that the council chamber is set up to do this, but if we go to have a rules meeting, for instance, in the basement, that's not going to have this.
No, I clarified today with Jen Ramsey, our executive director. At the moment, there's been no separate upgrades to any of the meeting rooms. So my suggestion would be then that we use the council chamber for these other meetings if we want to hybridize those.
I thought the main conference room had a new TV. The mayor told me that.
The council chambers just received a major upgrade, but at the moment, none of the meeting rooms, they're still push to record and we'll collect the SD cards. But again, as long as you're not having meetings that are at the same time simultaneous, we could possibly open up council chambers for committee meetings to allow this use. That's my suggestion. And I think over time, I don't know, over time, if we find this is working, there's capital monies that come in periodically through our contract that could be used for further upgrades.
Yeah.
I would see if we can get the conference room 1, the big conference room, get that one done. We could at least have some meetings there. But if we make a rule that all of our committees should allow for public remote access, then we have to have those meetings where it can happen. We can't have it in the basement. And
Right.
we always used to have conflict about where meetings were. So that's something we have to cross when we get to it. But
Yeah, and I mean, maybe it comes down to the agenda, and the agenda will state on it, this will be a remote meeting, remote public participation is welcome. Maybe the following week, it's like, nope, I don't know how to do that, but that's part of our process, I guess. But yeah.
I mean, I think that if we're being honest, I think that 90% of the time we know which meetings a lot of members of the public are going to want to participate in and which ones are basically just us.
I'm concerned about the counselor who really wants to go to the ordinance meeting but can't because they're not feeling good. And the ordinance meeting is happening other than in the council chambers. So I'd love to see this, and I don't know when, but I'd love to see it possible for more than one room available, because the council chambers is used for other things.
I think all this is, and people who have worked with me a long time in my other job know that when it came to technology, I always believed there was a way to do it. And so that I go in with that feeling, and if we have to have a laptop sitting on the table in a conference room and that person is zooming in and we have speakers so that the camera can pick up what they're saying and we face the camera toward that person, it's like they're sitting there and they're there and we don't have to install.
I was thinking the same thing, actually. We just need a laptop.
Yep.
It's just going to be a meeting this size.
Yeah.
We really just need to pull a laptop up and then if anyone wants to zoom in, they can.
Yeah.
Which still, like, laptops aren't free, but I actually do kind of imagine that after this whole school thing wraps up,
we'll have a
handful of them. So it might be something that we can do. I mean, I don't know. But right. I think these are sort of the details that we'll need to work out. But I don't see any harm in just giving the mayor a heads up that this is something we want to pursue in the form of a motion to recommend that she adopt this. What does CMR stand for?
This is just,
it might be, hang on.
it's how they catalog the,
Anyway, we can make the motion tonight to recommend to the full council at the next meeting that we put this forward to the mayor.
I think that's
what I think you're saying, right?
I guess we don't actually need to know what CMR means in order to.
Code of Massachusetts Regulations.
Okay, great.
Way to go, Erica.
Thank you.
I would, unless there's anything else you feel we need to discuss, I'd be happy to entertain that motion.
Somebody who has the actual language in front of them, like Peg, do you have that in front of you to make the motion?
I make a motion that the Rules Committee recommend to the full council that the mayor, the chief executive officer, accepts 940 CMR 29.10 2A, which will allow remote participation of public meetings within Easthampton.
Second.
Motion and a second. Okay, all in favor. Councilor Coniff.
Aye.
Councilor Rist.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Great. So I
We have
will.
a quorum here. I wonder what Omar thinks. He didn't say anything.
I'm quiet. I'm just listening. By the way, I like the idea.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know.
Thank you, Omar.
So
All right,
yeah, I
this is
think
good. Thank you for bringing this forward, Erica.
Yeah, I'm happy. I'm excited, and thanks for receiving it so pleasantly. Because I know there's some logistics to work out, but I feel really good about it. I think it'll be great for the city.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
this
think I think Peg's right. The tech will work out.
And
You get it in more than one room.
before we move off of this topic, so how do we feel about meeting with Jen Ramsey on the 10th? I didn't get a time from her, so I'm thinking she's thinking daytime. So thoughts?
Well, there's
I'm on
a 5
vacation,
o'clock
so I
flag
can do-
raising that she has, so it has to be before 5.
Yep.
I wouldn't mind inviting the mayor to see it, but we'd have to be in
I think
the
she's
building.
already seen it, but
Would we
she's
be in
gonna,
the
by the way, she's gonna accept this. So this is a slam dunk.
building?
So I think, I feel like they probably are talking like 2 or 3 in the afternoon, like their last thing as they go out the door. So if I propose 2 or 3-ish, are the 3 of us cool with that?
If that's official, if we can make that official, I'd like to know before Tuesday.
Yeah.
It has to do with
And
the line.
Erica
meeting. I'm sorry.
Erica, would you be available then?
Can't do 2 to 3:30. I could do before or after,
Okay, well,
but I honestly can get a walkthrough and etc.
Sure.
Are
do that.
we talking about going into city council?
Yes.
Is the mayor
Wearing
okay
masks,
with
socially
just the 3 of us?
well, hang on, calm down.
Okay.
Omar, did you want to attend that as well?
Yes.
Because I know this has been something that you also had interest in. So it would be at most the 4 of us. Wait, 1, 2, 3, 5 of us. And I will try to get it. Maybe. How about 1, Erica?
One would be better. Yep.
All right. If
1 is
not,
great for
it'll
me.
be between 2 and 3. Can you do 1, Omar?
Yes, I can do 1.
Can you
By
do
the way,
2?
1 is perfect. Yeah.
Can you do 2 to 3?
I can try, yeah, but I think I can do it too. I will make room if I have to.
I'll aim for 1, and then I'll let you guys know by Tuesday what time frame we have. I think in the interest of expediency, we may want to really try for, at minimum, this committee, the 3 of us, to get in there if we can't coordinate all 5 of us.
Sure.
I would agree.
But Peg, you're going to set this up and email us and tell us? Okay.
Yes.
So one question I have, Peg, if we're just doing a walkthrough and we're not going to actually be deliberating, do I need to in some way notify that the committee is meeting? Like, how does this work with, what should I tell Barb?
So we, according to open meeting rules, we can go off-site and look at something as long as we don't talk to each other about it. Jen will be doing all the thing, and we will be
Right.
watching her.
But we
So
could
it's
ask
educational.
We could ask Jen questions, can't we? I mean,
I'll double check. Yeah, I think
we're not
we could.
we're not deliberating on the topic. We're already making the recommendation. We
Yeah,
just
I
want to-
mean, I'll do, but I've been on remote things before that you can do, and I don't believe you necessarily have to tell anyone that you're doing that, because it's not open to the public
Okay.
when
Councilor
you go on
Felice.
road trips.
I'm just gonna caution that the 10th might be a little soon because I
That's
know.
the date she gave me.
Oh, she did give you that?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I believe like Ryan is the point person and then he's going to be training others in technology. So as long as she
Okay.
gives you the date, that's fine then.
Okay.
Great.
Would it be at all valuable to have Karen, the new IT person, involved at all? If we need to get a different kind of
She probably
program
already
other than
is.
Zoom?
I think she was involved in the install.
She just got hired, really? Was this just a
The install just happened. So
Wow, okay.
well, I'm moving quick. I'm like, oh, we have technology. Let's use it. We paid for it. So
Well, we first have to get out of this goddamn pandemic.
I agree.
Excuse you.
So, Can you ask the media to delete the
Dan, we have a
expletive deleted, please? Sorry. Not
Okay.
that I don't love Zoom.
Not that I don't love sitting in my cold basement office. Yeah. No. Okay. So this is great. Anything else on this topic? All right. Before we break up, Councillor Conniff, my understanding is that you did meet with Councillor Zaret on the 5C thing.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Would you like me to summarize our conversation?
Sure, that'd be great.
So it was a multifaceted conversation in that we went down a bunch of different paths that neither one of us went down together. We finally landed on a path that seemed like was more acceptable. My concern was, last time we met, we talked about me creating a template and that every city councilor would follow that template. Upon further conversation with some folks, that felt a little bit of like it could disenfranchise some people. Like we're creating guardrails around something too much, and we're asking people to, it just felt like we were over-processizing, I guess, let me put it that way. And so something that didn't need to be over-processized. So we wanted to give everyone their ability to do their own thing when they want to introduce something and not give them rigid rules. But I was adamant, Councillor Zaret really wanted the opportunity for people to ask clarifying questions, and I said, absolutely not. That is debate. No matter how you cut that, it's debate. So kind of what we landed on was doing a similar process as we do with financial first readings. Do a first reading, like read your thing, whatever thing is, but do it in the form of a motion. So, you know, whatever, like Erica's would be, you know, I am making a motion to introduce to you today the opportunity to remove a blah, 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 and read the whole thing. And then say, and in the form of a motion, I'd like to move that to the Rules Committee. Done. That's the only motion that we can do, is moving it to a committee. I don't want to, we just can't talk about it. And that was the sticking point that Councillor Zaret and I had. And then when we got to this, where we create it like a first reading in the form of a motion to move it to a committee, he was cool with that.
Okay.
Is this going to be a requirement of every measure that's sent to committee?
Well, no. I mean, I think it's, some of these don't lend themselves to this full kind of blown reading. So we can, through rules, if we want, be very, you know, parse it out. Which committees and the work that goes to those committees would qualify for a first reading, similar to finance stuff. Versus, or appropriations, I guess, more appropriately. Or we can just say it's up to each councillor, but that then lends it to, there's probably 2 councillors that would do it 100% of the time, and everyone else would probably not do it. And so if you're going to have a rule, it's got to be something that people follow. So I would say everyone would have to do it.
I think if you're going to present something, let's take the pole relocation. Eversource is requesting that we relocate this pole for this reason, and it's on a presentation. Somebody's written it up to be requested, and I don't even know who makes those requests. Barbara gets the request maybe, and then we send it to committee. But somebody's got to write up why this pole location is requested. It's a brief paragraph, but everybody's got to do something if you're going to send it to committee, so that when I get it in my packet, I'm reading it like Erica's thing. She made a nice, big, long description. And I don't think we'd have to worry about Owen not giving us a good description, but at least something that says, this is why this is being asked to go to committee. My reason is, we're voting on it. And I would say maybe 3 times in 26 years, well, 26 years come December, I have voted against sending something to committee because I didn't like what was being asked of us. And that's the vote. So if I'm going to vote against something, I want to know what is involved.
Mhm.
And if we get enough information on the measure that's being presented to us, and it could be something really simple, you know, or it could be a complicated ordinance.
Mhm.
The other night, we had the ordinance to request that we make officially the holiday for indigenous peoples. But he didn't write that up because we just had a long resolution for it, so it wasn't necessary. But if that was by itself, I would want some kind of explanation. Why do you feel this is necessary?
So again, I think
with subjects that might be controversial. I'm not saying that was, but I'm just saying anything. I think we have to make the rule at least that something has to be said.
yeah, and I think you hit on the more I thought about this since we last met, sort of the thing that you just hit on there is that really what we're talking about is a motion to introduce something to a committee, right? And so reason and like I understand that, like, you know, if there's going to be a vote, like the only times that I could see disagreeing with that vote are if A, this is something that I do not think should even be introduced to the council at all, or B, this is something that I think is being introduced to the wrong committee for one reason or another.
Well, let me give you an example. Remember our little beer cart that was supposed to go?
Yeah, I remember, and I remember you saying that you're...
I would not send that to committee because I was vastly opposed to it. I didn't even want to discuss it.
So there are times where I could see...
wrong in the sense that we should probably discuss everything, but I have the right to say no. Okay?
Yeah,
No, I mean,
let Tom finish.
I think, like, I could see a situation where I might feel like what I definitely don't want to see, just personally, is a situation where people are like debating the fine points of something or horse trading.
No, that shouldn't happen. No.
Hey, had you thought about maybe doing it like this instead? Like, that's the kind of stuff that should be going on in committee, and it's not appropriate on the first reading. But I could see a situation potentially where there was something where I was like, where I'm just sort of playing devil's advocate here, where like I could see a situation where there was a question I had to ask, and the reason I had to ask the question is because if it was how I understood it, then I don't even think we should be discussing this in the first place. Like, how would we handle that situation if there's something where I'm like, wait, are you seriously suggesting this, or do I have this wrong?
I think
Dan, hang on. I'll raise my hand.
Councilor Connolly. And then Councilor.
I would say that question could be asked prior to city council of that person. Are you like picking up the phone when you get the packet and going, are you seriously thinking that you're going to do A, B, and C? And if they say no, then there's your answer. But in a public forum, once it's been introduced, that's not a conversation we can have. We can't. Because your clarifying question could turn into a 10-minute dissertation by someone. And they'll weave in all of the reasons that they want this to happen. And, maybe that's part of it. I don't know. Go ahead, Dan. I wanted
to defend the fact that I think the chair in a committee or the president of the council has the discretion to say, wait a minute, that's debate. And the reason we have to say that is we haven't told the public that we're going to debate this tonight. We're just sending it to the committee. Secondly, the reason I voted against that particular item was because I had enough information. It was presented with enough information for me to say, are you kidding me? I don't even want to discuss this. That's how emotional I got about it. But the reason we vote on sending things to committee is because we have a choice whether we think this is something we want to do or even consider. Now, 99% of the time, we'll at least send it to committee and see where it goes.
Sure.
But some of the things, like that to me, was just outrageous. And it's not like we're not going to get an outrageous thing in the future.
Sure.
But if we don't have the information, it's not fair to the counselor to say no if it's not enough information. So I think the rule should be at least give something.
And maybe the rule gives, these are the absolutes you've got to contain. You've got to explain the thing. You've got to give a reason why this is important. and what, I don't know what the bullets might be, but to your point, Councilor Peak, I could see if during the discussion phase after the second, that it was, wait a minute, do you mean by ABC some egregious act that this thing will allow? I think the answer then really is a very quick yes or no, and you're right, Dan, it would be up to the chair to say you're veering off, just answer yes or no to the counselor who asked you that question or something. So I might be open to that. I just know that that has to be very strictly managed, and it has to be fair and equitable across everybody who introduces business. And because I don't want someone to say, you let him ask a question and answer it, but I didn't get to ask a question, so that's where it gets kind of dicey.
I think the other thing is, this is enlightening me that the council may need to be educated to the fact the reason we don't want these agenda topics to be discussed when we're just sending them to committee is it's unfair to the public if we're going to start making these discussions. Mm-hmm. We're sending it to committee. Now, the indigenous, I'm sorry, I can't pronounce that very well.
Changing
Salem and Owens resolution came with a tremendous amount of information. There's no way I shouldn't know what it's all about.
Sure.
If I do my homework. So that might be more than obviously a lot more than I needed. You want to change this? Fine, let's do it. But it was great. All I'm saying is if you give enough information, you're giving the counselor the right, doesn't need to ask questions because he knows what it's about. He'll ask the questions at the committee level. But it's very important that we emphasize to the full council that the reason we can't allow questioning during this debate on whether to send a committee is because it's not fair to the public. We didn't say we were gonna debate this evening.
Sure. The motion on the floor is about whether or not it should be sent to the
committee. Exactly. And Peg has done a great job disciplining that, I think, and it should be that way.
But I mean, I guess my point is just that, like, to me, like the point is that any conversation, I mean, just the way that we always say, like, all right, motion a second, any further discussion? All right, who's in favor? Like, what is the further discussion that could be allowed, right? And the only further discussion that I could ever see as being allowed would be about whether or not it was appropriate to send it to that committee. And
I said that I did it that night. I said, I do not believe this is appropriate for the city to even consider. I'm voting no. That's the second discussion on that matter. A rare
Councilor Connor.
According to parliamentary rules, when a motion and a second is made, the discussion is about the motion, not about anything else. So if the motion is, are we going to make Dan Riss the treasurer of this business? We can't start talking about, yeah, but Sue's the treasurer now and she should be the clerk. And we can't do that. Do we want to make this person the treasurer? Period. That's the only discussion. So that's where it gets dicey.
The only thing a counselor should do is say why I'm voting no, why I'm abstaining. The public has a reason to know why if you're going to say no to something or abstain from something.
And maybe the answer is I'm not sending this to committee because I feel that this is an incomplete request and I don't understand it.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's one of the big ones is like we have these 5C things. So like I feel like there might be a thing where I say like I don't think we should send this to committee because I don't believe that this is a complete request. And they might, I think at that point, have a valid reason to object and say, I actually do think it's a complete request. We can, I mean, this has never happened.
That's an appropriate discussion.
That's an appropriate discussion, but what's not an appropriate discussion is I'm not going to do this because I think you should do this other thing instead. Like that's something that you should hash out in committee.
So I mean, we should, kind of this is an evolution of the original rule we put in because I wasn't very happy with someone saying, let's have the ordinance committee develop an ordinance, period. And that was sent to committee. That actually happened. And this is an evolution where we're not going to send something to committee unless you give us proper information, significant information. And the finance committee things are examples that you know what it's about, you know why it's going to committee, you know what the purpose is for the request. That's, and it doesn't have to be a big 50-page theme, it could be bullet points. I mean,
Sure. Councilor Coniff.
We can go even crazier in that we make it so that if you are introducing new business to the council, it needs to go through the president on its way to the clerk. And the president can be the person that reads it and go, this is not complete, hand it back to them and go, punch it up and then resubmit it. That's another option. And I say this knowing that, you know, this will place a burden on someone who is not me.
Right.
So.
Oh, I think the information has to be there. And the first thing you would say is, I don't think counselors are going to accept this. You don't have enough information. You need to get me more. So,
yeah, and I know that there's been things like that where someone's put something in the packet and one counselor has, I actually can think of two separate times where this has happened. And one of the times I was the counselor, where I was like, this is not complete. I don't know what you're proposing. I can't vote to send this to committee as it is.
well, we have to, do we have to write a clarifying rule here to make it complete? I mean, Peg, you know what your discussions were. Are you willing to kind of write this up to something that's not too complicated a rule? The measure must have sufficient information and must be approved by the president before it be included on the agenda.
Yeah, I mean, I can put something together, but I think I would like to also see within the rule, and maybe I'll put it in there, and I don't know how this fell to me, but whatever, because I got the biggest mouth, but that we talk about and parameterize what the best practice is. You don't have to do the best practice, but you do it at your peril, in that the council may say, yeah, we're not doing anything with this because it's not complete. Right. So we can put that into the rule, but I'll put something together that basically outlines because the rule already states that you've got to have information and it's got to be somewhat clear. I don't have the rules in front of me. What is this, 5C? Mm-hmm. So today it says, such drafts shall be presented along with any additional information or research. Any council member measure request shall include a detailed list of objectives and/or requested council action. All requested drafts or actions must be submitted to the council clerk for inclusion into the packet. So we just need to punch that up because that's it. Like, that's the thing that no one's doing. But also, there's got to be some clear whys and yeah, I'm.
Owen, that was already there. Owen wanted to be able to introduce it somehow and not be shut down.
He wanted the ability to have clarifying questions go back and forth. With the council.
Okay. I think it's always been, if I write up a big thing and it's in the packet and I'm presenting it, I have this big thing on the salaries of elected officials. I presented it to you. Does any, well, this is after the fact. I'm sorry. If we're presenting something like that, I just have to explain that it's our duty to do this every term at the beginning of the term to look at elected officials. And I could write a small sentence like that up, and I could speak to it if somebody had a question. I didn't know that. It's in the charter. Here it is. You have to. That kind of thing. But clarifying questions, I'm not quite sure. If I have a question on something, I'll call Erica up if I didn't like what you were sending, or if I wanted to know, what does this mean? The remote participation. I can make a single phone call.
And to be fair,
it's not three of us. Yeah,
to be fair, and this is really the bigger issue, and he's right about this, is that the public should know what the heck we're introducing.
Exactly.
And a lot of times it's very abbreviated, and we know what it is, even if it's very short and brief. We're like, yeah, I know what that is. Well, we'll just do that.
I make a motion to do the zoning amendment with the lines to ordinance.
Yeah.
But we know what that is. And they could know what that is by reading the 90-page packet, but it might be easier if you say something like, hey, so I'm making a motion today to amend these lot lines, and the reason is blah, blah, blah. And make this in form of the motion to send this to ordinance. Just that blah, blah, blah might help a member of the public to decide, do they need to read that 90-page packet? Or like, is this something that they might want to drop in on that committee? I think that was the major point that Councillor Zaret was trying to make here. And, you know, then the sort of secondary question where I think I really see both of your points is around what level of debate should be allowed after that first reading. And I think we're basically agreeing that, like, the debate, to the extent it exists, has to be solely focused on the question of whether or not that item should be sent to that committee. So if I wanted to say, you know what, I really think that shouldn't go to ordinance, I think it should go to rules. Okay, we can have that conversation, and I may be overruled, but like, that's something. And if there's a case where like Dan, where you might say, I'm sorry, I think this is a horrible idea. I don't think there's any iteration of this that could ever be good. We shouldn't even be considering this. I just want to make that point. Again, that's within the scope of what we're discussing, which is, should this be sent to this committee? But right. Anything beyond that is inappropriate, because the public, and this comes up a lot where something's going to get introduced. When I did that affordable housing stuff, people said, hey, should I come and speak in favor of this? I was like, no, we're not. I mean, like, come and watch the housing presentation if you want, but like, this is just kind of going to go through, and then the real conversation starts in ordinance. But I've never seen something get shot down on first reading. Dan, yes.
Well, there's two things here. One is, Peg hit it on the head. We should make sure that councilors who have submitted a measure, there's two parts of the rule. The measure has to have enough information in it, as it states now, so that it's clear what the purpose is. And that goes in the packet. But the councilor who's introduced it should also be required to introduce it briefly before it's sent to committee, because that's for the public's need to know why it's happening. Okay. And let's say Erica's thing, she could explain it to at the meeting why I'm introducing this, because we might want to expand participation, etc. But that way the public knows why it's being introduced. I think that was a great point, Peg. It's two parts: enough information for the counselors, and secondly, that a counselor who's introducing it should speak to it. It shouldn't just go without someone saying something. And I think that's right, because the public needs to know more. They may not have read the packet. I mean, Let's face it, there's a lot of information.
For sure.
When I get a huge thing on 1 Ferry Street and it takes me forever to read it, I just turn off.
Yeah, and I mean, if we're being honest, like, I always read the packet, but I'm reading it with the idea of covering, somewhere between 50 and 100 pages in a limited span of time. So it's possible sometimes that, like, I see something, I'm like, okay, cool, I think I know what that's about. And then if someone were to introduce it with a first reading, like, just somehow in that verbal context, I might pick up on something and be like, oh, okay, I see where you're going with this. I want to drop in on that committee meeting and participate in this. That sounds like something that's really cool. And maybe I didn't fully grasp it from the intro. I mean, just different people write differently, and it's not always immediately clear what the point of everything is, especially, again, if you're talking about a packet that has like three big planning three big like planning presentations put into it. Like, it's possible to sometimes things just go over my head. I'm just a person. I don't know.
Peg, do you agree with that? That we should put that in the rule, that the counselor introducing it should make a brief statement?
No, I don't.
You don't want to put anything like that?
No. All of that should be in the thing. Like, the piece of paper that is in the packet, because again, you're going to get counselor spin on things, and we're going to go down rabbit holes. If we keep it in, I'm introducing this thing. This is why I'm introducing this thing. Here's what this thing is. I'm asking this body to move this to ordinance for further discussion. I didn't hear you, Dan.
Are you saying that what you just said is verbally stated at the meeting?
It would be in the packet written that way,
I understand that, but
but then they would say it out loud, yes.
All right, that's all I'm saying.
Oh, okay.
There
I
has
thought
to
you
be
meant,
an out-loud statement, and it
Yes.
should be simple.
yes,
It shouldn't be 100 pages being written.
right.
Simple reason why I'm sending this, so that if a public wants to get to that meeting, because, oh, this is interesting, like Tom said, we do it. But there should be something verbal. We should require the counselor to introduce it in a simple
I'm sorry,
way.
I misunderstood you. Yes.
That's all I'm
agree with that.
saying.
Yep.
And really, I feel like
Obviously, the information is already there in the rule that has to be there. Oh, Omar has his hand up.
1 second, Omar. I just want to make
Sure.
one quick point, and then you're good. I just wanted to say that really, I feel like we actually have a good model here, because Dan, you always do your first readings for finance, and I think that those are a good example of, like, I usually have a pretty good idea of what's going to finance without it being like a giant like monologue, but a sense of like where the money's coming from and what it's going to do. And like I always
It's simple.
And
I have
why?
a good idea. And why they're doing this, right? Like, it's not just like, oh, we're going to get some money for the fire department for some stuff. It's like, here's the amount of money, here's the account it's coming for, here's why the fire department believes that they need this money. Okay, and now I can decide whether this is something that I feel like I need to weigh in on or not. So yeah, that's all. Omar, go ahead. Councilor Gomez, I'm sorry.
You can call me Omar. That's my name. Oh, coach, whatever, it works for me. That doesn't matter. The only thing that I'm struggling a little bit, I like the idea. The only thing that I'm struggling is about brief. What is brief? Because to me, brief is 2 to 3 minutes. Maybe to someone else, brief could be 10 minutes because they speak for 2 hours. So I think if we're going to make a rule, we should make that clear. 1 minute, yeah, but we should make that clear. And about the motion.
Dan, hang on. Dan, hang on. Let Omar finish.
Thank you. And about the motion, I think is simple, because every single councilor should know that the only thing that we should be discussing at the motion is about moving the whatever topic we're talking about. And it's just that, we should follow the rules. And the rules is simple. The motion is about just moving this to X or Y committee. And the discussion should be only for that.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Agreed.
And I think that, when it really comes down to it, I mean, I have no problem setting some timelines. Maybe I'd say 2 minutes instead of 1, but I get the idea. But I do think that at the end of the day, like when it really comes down to it, I think the president has the ability to be like, Counselor, could you get to the point, and like, because there's some things that might actually just be insanely, I mean, there's even been finance things that have gotten introduced that just laying the context of what is even going on here and why this is allowed. Maybe it's something we've never done before and whatever. Like some of that tax stuff around One Ferry, like just introducing that took a minute because it's complicated. Yeah. But also when it's just like, I want to, change this ordinance from the language to say this to this. You don't need 10 minutes to do that. That you can do that in a minute. So I think I see what you're saying, that we don't want to just allow people to run roughshod over that like brief, because brief could really mean very different things to different people. But I also do think that we need a little bit of flexibility to account for just the fact that we have some very complicated things that get submitted, and then we have some very straightforward things. That's all.
Yep.
It's just, we need to remember that we're just sending this to committee. We don't have to explain the whole thing. We can be brief in why it's being considered, why it's being introduced. Like my finance committee thing on the fire department, that took more than a minute to introduce because there was like 30 accounts there. But it's very simple. The purpose was there. That's required by law. And all I was going to say when I rudely interrupted Omar, I'm sorry, Omar, was that if we want to make it any of this rule specific, the rules are designed for the president to monitor the meeting. We need specificity in the rule if we want it. If we want to say 1 minute or 2 minutes, it should be there. We say 3 minutes for public speak, but the president has a lot of discretion in that. But at least the 3 minutes is there to say, oh, your 3 minutes is up. We have 50 people who want to speak. The president has the authority to limit it because it's in the rule.
Right.
That's all I'm getting at. Be specific if we want to set a rule. Whatever rule we ever set should have enough specificity to give the president instruction. That makes sense, Tom?
Yeah, I think it does. I think we're in a good place with this. So what's next steps?
I believe that Councilor Rist has instructed me to write up the rule.
It was a polite request.
And get it back to this body for a vote at our next meeting.
Okay, just so you know, I did receive a text from Councilor Zara that said that you arrived at a really great agreement, but that he wasn't I got this morning, that he wasn't sure if he was going to be able to write it down in time for tonight's meeting. So he might be working on this too. So I don't know, coordinate in whatever way you feel is appropriate on that, I suppose.
Okay.
But it sounds like that's something that he's already working on, so that might spare you some labor.
We're in agreement that clarifying questions are not going to be allowed. And maybe, do we have to write that in the rule, Peg? I mean,
no, I think that we should just do it like we do finance. There's a first reading, we make it clear what this is about. I do think that if the counselors, like, if I submit something to public safety and I'm not on public safety, I do feel that, like, maybe it's okay if I make that, like, introduce it, since it's my thing. If that,
yeah, it should be you.
But that's but that, right, it's that, and that there's that any debate about this has to explicitly be about whether or not it should be moved to that specific committee.
Well, this relates to something else. If Jeff has something he's introducing and we want the public to know what he's doing, we have to make sure that non-counselors who are introducing something for us to consider a zoning change,
sure,
that it's not a 10-minute or 20-minute when we're just sending it to committee. I think that's another factor I just thought of. I don't know.
When outside bodies come and want to do like
we get a lot from the planning department.
Let's just, I mean, that's a wrinkle that we should, I don't think we need to necessarily arrive at a conclusion on that tonight, but just as a quick poll, like, maybe that's what we say. If we just say that, like, hey, so when you do these things, put them in the packet, but let's save the presentations for committee. I mean, that would really speed up our meetings, really.
Yeah.
I mean, no offense to the folks at the city who do that stuff. I mean, I know they're trying to be helpful, but given that the only thing we're actually discussing that night is sending it to committee, and given that all the information is in the packet, and given that we will be getting another presentation, presumably when that thing comes before us, like, I think if we just say, like, hey, could those conversations, like, really all that's happening tonight is a discussion about whether or not this should go to that committee, and any understanding of exactly, like, we don't need maps necessarily to have that conversation.
Right.
But Jeff should be able to say something, because again, we want the public to, oh, he's proposing a park or Mount Tom. They might want to get involved. It's something small, you know. But that's where I don't know how the president has to make a phone call, but the rule isn't just for city councilors, is what I'm saying. I don't know if you want to include anything in there, Peg, for.
Well, I think the rule is how we introduce business. And so that's the city council rule, is when new business from any source is introduced, it must contain the what, the how, and the why, and not a full-blown, and we will then determine, A, if it's a viable new business request, and we're going to vote thumbs up or thumbs down on moving it to a committee. And that, to Councilor Peak's point, once it gets to committee, lobby away, knock your socks off, do presentations, have a good time. But that's not what introducing new business is about.
All I'm bringing up is a brief statement so the public knows that this.
I think that can be part of the framework. Like, they can also be asked for a one-pager.
That's what I'm saying. Jeff has to be limited in how he presents this major topic. Seriously. We're only sending it to committee, but we do want the public to know what he's proposing.
Right.
I'm sorry, I'm picking on him, but
Well, just because he's the one who sends it the most often. Other people do send things to us, but and he's also so eager to, just keep a consistent narrative and keep people.
he gives us
really
enough
respect.
information that we can't possibly not know what he's proposing. But the public needs to know if they didn't read the 100-page packet.
Yeah, and particularly in
I'm serious.
I think just given like the history of the planning discipline in America, I think there's definitely like a desire for doing things to ensure like a certain degree of full transparency, because no one it just, even when we do all of that, you still see people who show up at meetings. They're like, well, no one told me about this, as if there's like something sneaky going on, and like, I respect what's going on there, but I do agree that like, let's figure out, let's just make sure that whatever this rule is, that it includes like how city officials who are introducing business, who are asking for business to be introduced to the committee, how they should go about this. And that for them too, like, this is really not the time and place, because if they do a big presentation, guess what? There's going to be a lot of questions. And those questions are good and important, and also this isn't the place for them. Do you guys?
We just need to make clear in the rule that this applies to everybody, and that its brevity is designed for the fact that this is just sending it to committee. It is not a debate about the topic, etc. I mean, we have to make that, because there may be things that the mayor or someone else wants to say about it before it's sent to committee. And we have to make the rule apply to everyone, including the mayor or the planner or anybody else that's applying for us to do something.
Right.
We have to be consistent application of the rule as always.
Yeah. All right. That sounds great. Anything else?
No, is Peg okay with my polite request to write something up?
Yes.
Okay, awesome.
Just because you're so eloquent.
I think this is going to be good and productive, and I think this was a good.
Councilor Pete, can we set another meeting like now? So
let's do it.
We can plan.
When are you thinking would be, like, next week after that?
Well, everything that's on our agenda, I'm only getting at the fact that we didn't announce it at council, but everything that's on our agenda has been talked about at council. I mean, we put it there. So if we want to have it for the 11th, in other words, it's okay. I just personally like telling the public there's going to be a rules committee meeting at a council meeting at this date. But they can also find out if they're really interested by looking at the agenda. So I don't mind the 11th if you want to do it, and I can do 5 o'clock.
Hold on. I feel like I have a lot going on the 11th.
You're supposed to.
And yet I don't. So there you go.
You need to remember you're retired.
I know. Okay, that'll work.
The 11th? Okay, I will put that in right now with Barb. And is there, like, when we meet for that time, I know we'll probably want to keep talking about this. Are there other things that we should take back up that you think, so just in terms of, like, should I be inviting anybody?
Last time we met, you were going to get in touch with the IT person and maybe have her come to the meeting to talk about emails.
Yeah,
why don't we do that? That would be good.
Okay, I will do that. I'll send those emails out, and then I guess I'll see you guys when we do that walkthrough next week, if not.
And we're going to send Erica's proposal to the full council next meeting, right?
Yes.
Okay.
The first step of it, yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Way to go, Erica.
Thanks, guys.
Dan, do you want to make a motion to adjourn, only because that's how I have the minutes?
I will make a motion that we adjourn the rules meeting.
I will second that.
In a second. Councillor Coniff.
Aye.
Councillor Rest.
Yes.
And I vote aye as well. So great job, everybody. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you soon.
Great.
Okay,
Thanks.
good night, everybody.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.
Good night. Bye.